Perhaps no phrase in modern philosophy hits quite as hard or is as misunderstood as Friedrich Nietzsche's declaration. God is dead. It sounds bleak, maybe even defiant. Many imagine a fist raised against the heavens, a declaration of atheism. But what if the shocking truth behind these words is far more complex and speaks directly to the anxieties and possibilities of our own lives right now? Why does this phrase still echo? Why did you click on this video? Perhaps you feel a sense of drift in the world, a questioning of old certainties. Maybe you've wondered where we find our moral compass when traditional anchors seem to fade. This isn't just academic curiosity. It touches the core of how we seek meaning and value in our existence. Nietzsche, writing in the late 19th century, wasn't necessarily celebrating. He was diagnosing. He saw a monumental shift occurring in Western civilization, a change so profound its consequences were only beginning to unfold. He wasn't just talking about belief. He was talking about the entire foundation upon which meaning, morality, and purpose had been built for centuries. Imagine a massive, ancient oak tree, its roots intertwined with the very soil of a community. For generations, everyone understood the world in relation to this tree. It provided shade, marked seasons, centered their lives. Now imagine someone noticing the tree is profoundly sick, its leaves withering, its strength failing. This is closer to Nietzsche's observation. The God Nietzsche declared dead represented more than a deity. It symbolized the overarching system of Judeo-Christian belief that had provided Europe with a shared framework for understanding reality, for defining good and evil, for giving suffering meaning, and for promising ultimate justice. It was the bedrock of value. Nietzsche observed that belief in this framework was eroding. Science, reason, historical criticism, these forces were chipping away at the unquestioned authority of religion in public and private life. Fewer people were truly living as if God was the ultimate, all-seeing judge and source of truth. The central pillar was weakening. So when Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him," who are the we? Not necessarily atheists alone. We represents the collective drift of Western culture away from reliance on divine authority. Our scientific advancements, our philosophical inquiries, our changing social structures all contributed to this shift. Think of it like the slow fading of sunlight. At first, the change is barely perceptible. Shadows lengthen subtly. The air cools slightly. But eventually, dusk arrives and the world is fundamentally different. Nietzsche saw humanity entering a twilight phase regarding its foundational beliefs. He wasn't gleeful about this death. He was terrified. He understood the profound implications. If the ultimate source of value is gone, what prevents everything from collapsing into meaninglessness? What holds society together? What guides individual lives? This was the abyss Nietzsche peered into. This potential collapse into meaninglessness has a name: nihilism. The belief that life is without objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value. That moral codes are baseless, social constructs are arbitrary, and existence is ultimately pointless. This, Nietzsche feared, was the immediate danger following the death of God. Imagine a ship's captain navigating by a single, brilliant North Star for generations. Suddenly, the star vanishes. The crew is adrift, the old map's useless. Panic, despair, and confusion might set in. This is the feeling of nihilism Nietzsche worried would grip humanity. Where do we steer now? Without God as the ultimate lawgiver, notions of absolute good and evil become questionable. If morality isn't divinely ordained, is it just a human invention? Can one set of values be truly better than another? Nihilism whispers, everything is permitted, not as liberation, but as a terrifying void of ethical certainty. And what about suffering? Religion often provided a framework to endure hardship, seeing it as a test, a path to salvation, or part of a divine plan. Without that transcendent meaning, suffering can feel random, cruel, and utterly pointless. This intensifies the potential for despair. Nietzsche saw this nihilism not just as a philosophical problem but as a psychological and cultural crisis. A loss of vitality, a weariness, a sense that striving and achieving were ultimately futile. The last man, he warned, would be content with shallow comforts, seeking only safety and avoiding risk or greatness. So the shocking truth isn't simply that belief faded. It's the potentially devastating vacuum left behind. It's the realization that the foundations we took for granted were crumbling, and we hadn't yet built anything strong enough to replace them. That's the precipice Nietzsche saw humanity standing upon. But Nietzsche wasn't only a prophet of doom. His diagnosis was dire, but it contained within it a challenge, a call to action. The death of God wasn't just an ending, it was also a potential beginning. A terrifying, demanding, but ultimately liberating beginning. If the old source of values is gone, where do new values come from? Nietzsche's radical answer, from us. Humanity, now untethered from divine command, faces the immense task of creating its own meaning and values. We must become the source of our own purpose. This is an almost unbearable responsibility. It's easier to inherit values than to forge them. It's safer to follow old maps than to chart new territories. Nietzsche knew this transition would be fraught with danger and difficulty. Many would shrink from the task. He called for the emergence of individuals capable of this value creation. Not necessarily leaders in a political sense, but individuals who could overcome nihilism within themselves, embrace life in all its complexity, its joys and its suffering, and affirm it by creating meaning. This is where the concept of the Übermensch, or overman, comes in, often wildly misinterpreted. It's not about a master race. It represents the potential for humanity to overcome its current limitations, to transcend nihilism by becoming authors of new values, embracing earthly existence fully. The Übermensch represents self-mastery. It's about harnessing one's will, shaping one's character, and defining one's own purpose rather than passively accepting inherited norms or succumbing to despair. It's a process of continuous becoming, of striving towards one's highest potential. Creating values doesn't mean anything goes. Nietzsche emphasized affirming life, embracing challenges, seeking growth, and cultivating virtues like courage, creativity, and honesty. It's about establishing values that enhance life and human potential, rather than denying or devaluing earthly existence. Think of building a magnificent cathedral, not to praise a god, but as a testament to human ingenuity, dedication, and aspiration. The act of creation itself, the striving for excellence, imbues the structure with meaning. This is analogous to how we might create values. This perspective shifts the focus from seeking meaning out there, in heaven, in scripture, in tradition, to finding it within our own capacity to shape our lives and our world. The responsibility is immense, but so is the potential for authentic, self-directed living. So how does this century-old philosophy speak to us now? We live in a world where traditional authorities continue to wane for many. We grapple with conflicting value systems, information overload, and sometimes a pervasive sense of meaninglessness, echoes of the nihilism Nietzsche foresaw. The digital age bombards us with possibilities, yet can leave us feeling disconnected and adrift. We see curated lives online, measure ourselves against impossible standards, and perhaps struggle to find a solid ground for our own worth and purpose. Nietzsche's challenge resonates powerfully here. His work urges us to ask ourselves, what values do I choose to live by? Not just inherit, not just passively accept, but actively affirm and cultivate. Where do I find meaning in creativity, in relationships, in contribution, in mastering a skill, in confronting challenges? It encourages us to take responsibility for our own inner landscape, to become aware of the narratives we tell ourselves about our lives and the world. Are we succumbing to nihilistic despair, or are we actively seeking to build meaning, even amidst uncertainty? This doesn't require grand, world-changing gestures. Creating value can happen in the small choices we make daily. Choosing courage over fear, compassion over indifference, discipline over complacency, learning over stagnation. It's about the quality of our engagement with life. Nietzsche's shocking truth, then, is twofold. First, the sobering realization that the old certainties providing meaning are gone for many. Second, the electrifying, terrifying, and ultimately empowering realization that the task of creating meaning falls squarely upon our shoulders. It's a call to become active participants in our own destiny. It invites us to look at challenges not just as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth, for forging strength, for defining who we are. Can we embrace the struggle, the resistance life offers, and use it to build something meaningful within ourselves? Nietzsche's philosophy is demanding. It offers no easy answers, no comforting dogma to fall back on. It places the weight of existence firmly in our hands. But in doing so, it also offers the possibility of a profound and authentic freedom. So the next time you hear God is dead, remember it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a question posed to each of us. In a world without guaranteed meaning from above, how will you choose to live? What values will you embody? What meaning will you create? The shocking truth is ultimately about potential. Our potential to succumb to meaninglessness, yes, but also our potential to rise to the occasion, to become creators, to affirm life in all its terrible beauty, and to forge a purpose worthy of our humanity. The choice, Nietzsche suggests, is ours. Consider this. What is one small way you can actively create value or meaning in your life today? Not because you have to, but because you choose to. The answer doesn't need to be monumental. Sometimes, the most profound shifts begin with the smallest, most intentional steps. Nietzsche's message wasn't about destroying faith for individuals who find genuine solace and guidance there. It was a cultural diagnosis about a widespread shift. He observed the foundations shaking and asked, "What happens next? What do we build now?" The fear of nihilism is real. When external authorities weaken, it's easy to feel lost. We see this today in polarization, in the search for new certainties, sometimes found in rigid ideologies or fleeting trends. The void is uncomfortable, and we rush to fill it. Nietzsche challenges us to resist easy answers. He pushes us towards the harder path, self-reflection, critical thinking, and the courageous act of defining our own principles. This requires honesty with ourselves about what we truly value, beyond social pressure or inherited beliefs. Think about moments where you felt truly alive. Often, these involve overcoming a challenge, creating something new, connecting deeply with others, or pushing your own boundaries. These experiences hint at the life-affirming values Nietzsche pointed towards. They are found in engagement, not withdrawal. The death of God can be seen not as a loss of cosmic supervision, but as humanity reaching a certain kind of adulthood. Like a young adult leaving home, there's fear and uncertainty, but also the freedom to shape one's own life, make one's own mistakes, and celebrate one's own triumphs. This responsibility can feel overwhelming. How can I create values? But it starts with intention. It starts with deciding that your life, your choices matter. That how you treat others, how you pursue your goals, how you face adversity, all contribute to the meaning you build. Nietzsche wasn't advocating for selfishness. While focused on individual potential, he understood that values are often forged and expressed in relation to others, through loyalty, love, mentorship, and contributing to a flourishing community, albeit one based on freely chosen principles. Consider the power of art, music, literature. These are human creations that explore the depths of experience, grapple with suffering, celebrate joy, and propose new ways of seeing the world. They are prime examples of humanity creating meaning and value beyond mere survival. The challenge, then, is to live artistically, in a broader sense, to approach our lives with intention, creativity, and a willingness to shape the raw material of our experience into something meaningful, something that reflects our highest aspirations. This involves embracing discomfort. Growth rarely happens in the comfort zone. Confronting our fears, questioning our assumptions, enduring setbacks, these are necessary parts of forging a strong character and defining what truly matters to us. It also requires what Nietzsche called amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not passive resignation, but the active embracing of everything that has happened, good and bad, as necessary elements that shaped who we are. To wish nothing different, forward or backward. Loving one's fate allows us to integrate our entire history into our present strength. It frees us from resentment and regret, allowing us to pour our energy into creating the future based on the values we choose now. The shocking truth is not a reason for despair, but a call to vigilance and creativity. Vigilance against the slide into nihilism, and creativity in the constant, ongoing project of building meaning in our lives and communities. Nietzsche saw this creative act as the highest affirmation of life. To say yes to existence, with all its challenges and uncertainties, precisely because we have the power to imbue it with value through our choices, our actions, our perspectives. This perspective doesn't eliminate suffering or difficulty, but it reframes it. Instead of seeing hardship as evidence of meaninglessness, we can see it as the resistance needed to build strength, the contrast needed to appreciate joy, the catalyst for creating resilience. Think of how athletes train. They intentionally push against resistance to build muscle. The struggle isn't something to be avoided, it's the very means of transformation. Nietzsche suggests we can adopt a similar attitude towards life's challenges. Ultimately, understanding God is dead is less about theology and more about psychology and culture. It's about recognizing a shift in human consciousness and grappling with its consequences, the burden and the liberation of self-determination. Are we passive inheritors of a fading worldview, or active architects of a future built on human-created values? That is the core question Nietzsche leaves us with. A question that demands not just intellectual understanding, but personal engagement. The search for meaning is perennial. Nietzsche's work suggests that in our era, the most potent source of meaning lies not in escaping the world, but in embracing it fully, shaping it consciously, and finding our purpose within the richness of earthly existence. This requires courage, the courage to face uncertainty without succumbing to fear, the courage to define our own path, the courage to live authentically even when it's difficult. It demands honesty, brutal honesty with ourselves about our motivations, our fears, our desires, and the values we truly hold versus those we merely profess. And it requires creativity, not just artistic creativity, but the creativity to find new solutions, to imagine different possibilities for our lives and societies, to build bridges where old paths have crumbled. Nietzsche's ideas are often challenging, sometimes unsettling, but they are also profoundly life-affirming if understood correctly. They call us not to despair, but to greatness, the greatness of becoming who we truly are, creators of our own meaning. The shocking truth behind God is dead is not an endpoint. It's a starting line, a challenge issued across the centuries asking us, now that the old maps are fading, will you dare to draw your own? Let this understanding not be merely intellectual. Let it sink in. Feel the weight of the responsibility, but also the exhilaration of the freedom. What small act of value creation can you undertake, right now, inspired by this perspective? We often seek grand narratives, overarching purposes handed down to us. Nietzsche suggests the most powerful narrative is the one we author ourselves, day by day, choice by choice. It's built from the ground up, through lived experience. Consider the relationships in your life. How can you infuse them with consciously chosen values like loyalty, presence, deep listening, or mutual growth? This is value creation in action, strengthening the human bonds that sustain us. Think about your work or daily activities. Can you approach them not just as obligations, but as arenas for cultivating excellence, discipline, or service? Finding meaning in the process, not just the outcome. Even moments of leisure can be imbued with intention, choosing activities that genuinely restore and enrich us, rather than merely distract or numb us. Engaging curiosity, learning, appreciating beauty, these affirm life. Nietzsche's challenge isn't to become superhuman, but to become fully human. To embrace our potential for reason, creativity, courage, and connection, and to build a life, and perhaps contribute to a world grounded in these life-enhancing values. The absence of a universal, mandated purpose doesn't have to mean the absence of all purpose. It means purpose becomes a personal discovery, a creative act, a chosen commitment. This makes it potentially even more meaningful. So the phrase "God is dead" acts like a philosophical Rorschach test. Some see only darkness, loss, and chaos. Others, following Nietzsche's difficult path, see a terrifying but ultimately necessary space opening up for human responsibility and creativity to flourish. This perspective requires a shift from looking outward for validation or instruction, to looking inward towards our own capacity for judgment and value creation, and outward again to engage with the world actively and purposefully. It asks us to be the sculptors of our own souls, the captains of our own ships, the authors of our own stories. A daunting task, certainly, but perhaps the most profound adventure life offers in a world undergoing constant change. Nietzsche's insights are not commandments, but invitations. Invitations to think critically, to live deliberately, and to participate consciously in the ongoing creation of meaning in a complex world. By understanding the true depth behind "God is dead," we move beyond shock value or simple interpretations. We engage with a profound diagnosis of our cultural condition and a challenging vision for human potential. It reminds us that philosophy isn't just an abstract game. It grapples with the most fundamental questions of existence. How should we live? What is truly valuable? How do we find meaning in the face of mortality and uncertainty? The answers may no longer be simple or universally agreed upon, but the process of asking the questions, of engaging in the search, is itself a vital part of a meaningful human life. Nietzsche encourages us to undertake this search with courage and creativity. Let the initial shock of the phrase give way to contemplation. What foundations for meaning exist in your own life? Are they inherited or chosen? Are they sturdy enough to weather storms? Nietzsche challenges us to build strong foundations within ourselves, based on values that affirm life and foster our highest potential. Not out of obligation to an external authority, but out of respect for the preciousness and possibility of life itself. His message endures because the questions he raised are still acutely relevant. In an age of rapid change and fractured narratives, the task of creating coherent meaning and values is perhaps more urgent than ever. Don't mistake Nietzsche's critique of old values as a rejection of all value. He sought higher values more deeply rooted in the affirmation of earthly life and human potential, values capable of sustaining us after the twilight of the old gods. The shocking truth isn't just a historical footnote about 19th century Europe. It's a living question about where we, individually and collectively, find our anchor, our direction, and our purpose in the 21st century. May this exploration spark not anxiety but a renewed sense of agency, a realization that even amidst cosmic indifference or societal flux, your choices, your values, your commitment to living fully matter profoundly. They are the meaning you create. Nietzsche's declaration wasn't the last word, but perhaps the beginning of a new conversation, one we are all invited to join. How will you answer the challenge laid bare by the death of God? How will you affirm life and create value in your corner of the world?